we thought it might be fun to hear it right from the character's mouth. It also helps that I have at my table one of the best role players in the history of the game. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Nestor Coyne.
I've bounced around quite a bit since cutting my teeth on the mean streets of Report. Magnimar, Nadal, Cheliax. I've been south to the Shackles and east to Assyrian, as the saying goes. Generally, I stayed till I felt the wanderlust, or till I wore out my welcome, usually the latter. But a little while back, I found myself in a hard, cold north, in Ustalav, and soon enough fell in with the Demon's Horde Mercenary Company. I don't know if you heard of them, but they got rather a dark reputation. But it suits me, as they were less inclined to ask pointed questions about my past. But before too long, I got assigned to guard the caravan of this fat old grain merchant going on a route to Urgir and Belkson. And with talismans of safe passage from the orcs, so they didn't bother us, things were quiet. I'm ashamed to say I got lax in my duties and took to the drink a bit too much one night. Always liked to drink. Wouldn't you know, it was that very night we were set upon by giants. Or they made quick work of the sober guards, if indeed they were sober, I can't say. And as disappointed as they were to find all those laden carts stuffed only with corn, they were even less enamoured of the idea of taking captives. So they made their way down the line, snapping necks and spilling guts. And your faithful narrator was taking up the rear. Now, my old dad used to say to me, "You're too clever by half, my son, and half again is mad." And this is important to bear in mind when I tell you, dear listener, that by the time they got to me, my plan was fully formed. "My dear fellow," I said to the brute, "did you think we deal exclusively in foodstuffs? Oh, no. When we set forth from Caliphas, we were bursting with treasures, sparkling jewels, carven tusks of ivory, boats of finest silk and spices from far Chan. We've sold them along the way, of course, and received cash recompense in return, but my employer fears bandits, you see, and giants most of all. On his order, I have buried the gold to be reclaimed on our return. Only I know where it is." Now, it wasn't true, of course, but I am, if nothing else, a talented and practised liar, and I have been honing this skill for decades. A glint of greed in his big saucer eye told me that he had taken the bait.
"You say me where, little man?"
"It would be my pleasure," I said. "But only if you promise me a finder's fee, only my fair share, of course."
"What is fair?"
Now, rather than embark on a lengthy discourse on the nature of fairness, I decided to cut to the chase. "Half." A moment of bemused silence soon gave way to chuckles, then laughter. Oh, how they did laugh.
"Joke. Little man makes joke. What you say?"
I said, "I get half the gold. Sorry, I didn't catch your name."
"Jorik,"
he rumbled. "Lovely. Anyway, that's the deal, Jorik, you towering pile of donkey dung. I get half, or you get nothing." Now, my dear listeners, I don't know if you've ever felt a fist the size of a pickle barrel slam into your gut, but the feeling is, well, it's quite indescribable. But suffice to say, I don't recommend it.
"Now I say deal, little man. Jorik get gold. You get nothing."
He drove his pillar of a finger into my back as I lay in the dirt, and bent down so I could feel his hot breath on my neck.
"You say where?"
Over the coming days, dear friends, they did use every trick of torture and deprivation that they could think of. My trusty hidden lockpick sewn into the fabric of my undershirt was of little comfort, as I couldn't reach it, and even if I could, it would be little use against the thick hempen ropes that bound my hands. But I wouldn't budge. I would bide my time, waiting for the tiniest dropping of a guard, the narrowest of openings. Half or nothing, I'd spit through swollen lips. Half or nothing. Eventually, I could tell that they were becoming quite frustrated with my lack of compliance, and old Jorik was really laying into me with increased zealousness. And after some, fairly cutting speculation on my part regarding his mother's chosen profession, the big bugger swung his fist full force into my gob with a sickening crunch. My front top teeth went scattered all over the ground, much to the delight of the gathered throng.
"Now you say, little man?"
I lifted my head, smiled a red smile, as I felt the blood trickle down my chin. Half or nothing. He swung again, and I was out cold. When I came to, I heard him grumbling, saying that they would head south towards home, and if I wouldn't say where to them, I would say where to him, the boss man. I heard his name then, whispered in fear and awe. I jotted it down in the old ledger, in the debit column. But just then I spotted something metal in the dirt, close enough to reach with my feet. A single silver coin. Maybe it fell out of Jorik's purse when he knocked out me pearlies, I couldn't say. But quiet as a mouse, I pulled it along the ground with my foot till it reached my bound hands. I palmed it just as one of them looked over. But as fate would have it, the very next day we happened upon an overturned cart with kegs spilling out of it all over the road. Turns out they were full of gash, which is a distinctively foul and potent brand of Orcish blood wine favoured by the upper crust of Urgir. And wouldn't you know, the big louts couldn't help themselves, and by the time the moon rose they'd guzzled every drop. One by one they nodded off, till only I remained. I slipped a coin between my fingers and began scraping its rim against a lump of granite at the small of my back. Screech! Screech! That sound echoed all over the campsite, but was mercifully swallowed by the snoring of giants. I kept at it till I caught myself on the edge, and I started working the ropes round my wrists. Strand by strand gave way until I was finally able to work my hands loose. I untied my ankles and rose to my feet, stretched out my limbs, cracked my neck, and set about my business. When old Jorik opened his eyes, it was me he saw, surrounded by the dead and soaked in stinking blood. Old Betsy right there in my hand like she never left it. I had saved him for last, and I made sure he was awake for the end. I grabbed the rest of my gear and all the coins I could find. I'm no expert at navigating through the wild, but I do know north from south, and me left and me right, as my old dad would say. South they were taking me, and south I would go. I'd heard of civilization that way, and perhaps I could find my way all the way to the big boss man. Baniziledja, so to speak. Many nights later, in the driving rain, I saw it, the so-called City of Trunau. It was a bit rough round the edges, but any port in a storm, as they say. I talked my way past the guard and instinctively found my way to the most dangerous bar in the town, the Killing Ground. I sauntered through the door, past a sad-looking armoured wolf that was tied up at a hitch for some reason, and made straight for the illicit dice game in the back. I pushed my way into the circle of bounders, off-duty guards by the look of them, and dropped my coin purse right in the middle. "Now then, lads," I said, "who wants to lose a week's wages?" This cheeky green-eyed bastard with the biggest bank took me up. He had this sort of natural smirk that drove me batty, and I was looking forward to leaving him destitute. Now, I should have known something was up straight away, but I was a bit tired and worn out from my recent endeavours. So I slipped my loaded dice into my palm and started rolling. But, much to my surprise, the dice were failing me. No matter how well I rolled, he rolled better, and I was bleeding silver. Before I knew it, I lost it all. "Was that your last coin, Mr. Coyne?" He laughed with edges of mouth twitching up.
I'm afraid they don't look too kindly on beggars in here. What's that you broke? I heard the barkeep as he came waddling over. Listen, if you're skint, you'd better be on your way. This ain't no charity house.
Now, at this point, I knew he had cheated me. No honest gambler would ever look that smug. Now, ordinarily, in this situation, I would have humbly gathered my things, left the establishment, only to hide in the shadows until he emerged. Then I'd follow him at a distance till he staggered past a sufficiently dark alley, pull him into it, kill him, and take my money back. But I looked out the window, and it was still raining. And the thought of standing in that while I waited for this cunt to drink his way through my silver was decidedly unappealing. Quick as a blink, I snapped Betsy from a hidden sheath on my wrist and plunged it right into his throat, under the chin. As the blood sprayed, he staggered back and his loaded dice dropped from his sleeve into the circle. "There, you see," I shouted. The locals were on me in an instant, and the guards were grabbing me, throttling me, and I think a little halfling bloke was jabbing me in the bollocks at one point, but I was used to pain. And I got dragged out, down the streets, them telling me I was going to get strung up. It's a fair cop, I thought. But the joke's on you lads. I got me lucky pick sewn into my tunic. I'd get a couple of good nights' rest, pick the lock on my cell when the time is right, rob the place, and then make my way south in search of the big boss, Bob's your uncle. But funny thing though, my lucky pick was gone. They threw me in a cell, and I felt for it, and it wasn't there. Fuck. But I didn't panic. I'd always had a funny habit of pulling things out when all seemed lost. After all, I was the sole survivor of the wreck of the Harpy's Shriek. Better to be lucky than good, as my old dad used to say, and I'd always been quite lucky. I'd just bide my time, wait for my opening. I pulled myself up onto the cot and lay back with my hands behind my head. I closed my eyes and sang a little song from the old times as I waited for dawn.